So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. I will read you their bio right before they do a little presentation for us, and then we will be taking questions at the end. So I'd like to introduce Penny Decoux, Director of Mission at Cancer Connection. Penny's professional experience with cancer began as a patient navigator for the ACS Highland Plains Navigation Center, followed by several years as staff social worker at Texas Oncology in Austin, Texas. Currently, she serves as director of the Austin-based nonprofit Cancer Connection. This organization facilitates emotionally supportive peer matches between cancer patients and survivors of the same or similar diagnosis. She also holds a health science degree in natural medicine from the Southern School of Natural Therapies in Melbourne, Australia. Penny has a strong interest in holistic health, community collaboration, and supportive counseling for chronic illnesses. Please allow me to welcome Penny Decoux.
Opportunity to come out to speak to you all. Thank you for coming out here. And I'm going to just take a few minutes now. The topic tonight is relationships and cancer. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what is distinct with peer support groups or peer support and support groups with other cancer peers. Just a little background to begin with. Peer support programs, and by a peer, of course, what do I mean by a peer? It would be someone who has gone through an experience similar to your own, and in this instance, we're talking about cancer. And peer support programs have been in existence for a long time. They're supported by major cancer organizations such as ACS. You may have heard of their Reach to Recovery program, their Man-to-Man for prostate cancer. The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, they have a great program called Peer Connect. And of course, LIVESTRONG. I found it really interesting that I think you used the term, our goal is for you to know that you are not alone. I really liked the quote that I found when I was doing a little research for this, which is actually from a person who writes for Planet Cancer, which is an online support group for young adults for LiveStrong. Everyone feels rare if they feel alone. One thing I have noticed at Cancer Connection, where we do matches between folks who are newly diagnosed and are volunteers who have gone through a cancer experience, is they'll often call and say, I have a rare cancer. And what's probably maybe not a cancer they hear of all the time, the fact is it feels rare, but because before they get to connect with someone else in the cancer community, they feel so alone. There's a lot of theoretical support, and it's something, I wouldn't say actually there's a lot. I'd say the theoretical support for the benefits of support groups and peer matches, it's growing, but there's always just been a very gut feeling about, well, why not? Of course, this works. If you were interested in it, shoot me an email. I've got lots of articles about coping theory, social comparisons, all that kind of thing that you want to tell your funders so that they know it's based in science. But really, what peer support is based upon is that the idea that someone who's survived the disease, they've walked in some similar shoes. It's as simple as that. They've had some firsthand experience of the treatment, and there's a trust in there that facilitates the sharing of experiences. What's the goal of peer support and of support groups in general that are made up of peers? I think it can pretty much be brought down to helping patients adjust to their diagnosis, to their treatments, by offering dimensions of support that I think LiveStrong really brings to the fore as well. Emotional support, informational support, and practical support. So LiveStrong asked me to speak a little about what makes peer support distinct from support from family and friends. Sometimes our volunteers will go into different treatment centers, and we go around and we take snacks, and we'll tell them a little bit about, here in Austin we have a wonderful group of volunteers that will be happy to speak to them, and they'll say, oh no, it's okay. I've got lots of family and friends. And and that's great. That's wonderful. They don't have to be either or. I think some of you who have cancer or who are a caregiver may know yourself that, especially in a lot of my conversations I've had with people going through a cancer experience, is your lives are interconnected. And sometimes it can be difficult to share with people or your wife or your husband that you're scared, you're really uncertain about the future, you're angry, and your caregiver wants to be there for you. They want to just be that 100% superhero holding you up, but they're getting a little tired of you being sick, and they're getting a little tired of being on 24 hours, and there's just not a human being on this earth that can do it all. But we want to, and we want to be there, and we want to be positive. And if you come to a support group or you talk to a survivor, you're coming into what a lot of people call the club you never wanted to join, but you meet some really great people. And there's a lot of topics that hold a lot of emotional weight and a lot of stigma, such as death, fear of death, impending death. And that's not to say if you go to a support group, that's what everyone's going to talk about. But say you wanted to, the room isn't going to suddenly, whoa. You know, you're with folk who have had some of these similar thoughts. Some people like that interaction of a group. I ran a group here in Austin called Living with Cancer, all diagnoses, all ages, all stages. And you know, sometimes we joke around, sometimes we tell horrible stories about our doctors and you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And sometimes it goes a little deeper. The one-on-one is easy. You can do it on your computer. There's that anonymity. You can talk to somebody on the telephone. Some examples of one-on-one programs are, of course, Immerman's Angels, which is national, if not worldwide, based out of Chicago. But don't hesitate, for those of you who are not in Austin, to ask at your hospitals, at your oncology centers, about any kind of peer support that might be in your community, because there you might find folk who you might want to meet up face-to-face with, if that suits you, and also there's a good chance they've been to a lot of the same centers, know a lot of the same people. There's just that commonality there. Peer support, family and friends. The other, just on the flip side of it, you may not want to stress out your caregiver, but at the same time, you've got a lot of cancer patients these days. We've got these great drugs and everything. You don't necessarily seem that ill. And that's kind of a whole weird other thing. And people are like, well, you look pretty good. You know, you must be doing okay. And the truth is you've still got a lot of things going on, and other cancer survivors are going to get that. I do want to stress that relationship, though, of family and friends, it's complementary. It's not either or, and it can be nice to have a place where you get to go in and be the cancer patient, and then you can come home and your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your girl hanging out with your friends, whatever the case may be. So what do they talk about at support groups and in peer matches? Well, let's see. One of the benefits that a lot of people have reported back to us is that by talking to someone who's been through the experience, there is a feeling that they can look at what worked for that person, what didn't work for them, how they coped, and by doing so, it can really begin to increase their feelings of strength and security that they can walk this tightrope as well. Another one that I definitely have seen in the support groups I've been a part of is greater confidence when talking to your physicians and other medical professionals. Suddenly it's not just you going up against nurse or doctor and those big words they use. You've talked to other people in your support group. They're telling you about how to write your questions down. You've got a little more, me and my team, you know, we know how to advocate for ourselves. We know that, you know, yeah, I can ask some questions and I can wait right here until I get some answers. So not to sound, you know, antagonistic, but just greater confidence. And normalization. You know, your response, if you fall apart in a puddle, guess what? That's kind of normal. It may not seem normal, but it's normal to what is occurring at that time in your life. Will you stay in that puddle? Probably not. But being able to talk to someone who may have been in that puddle as well and is somewhere very different now, that can be really nice to know and really decrease those feelings of isolation and despair. So again, what's the nitty-gritty of what you might get into? People love to talk about their doctors and their medical professionals. Your wife is going to want to hear it, you know, only so much, but boy, another cancer patient, boy, do they want to talk about their medical experiences. you'll find that you have other things in common besides just cancer, and that's a really nice thing to find out, that even cancer patients, when talking to other cancer patients, guess what? They're more than their cancer. Family work, sharing of information is definitely something that happens a lot in supportive relationships between peers. And you'll find coping with the illness and its treatment. So, I mean, those are just some examples, but that really doesn't limit it. So if you have not done so, whether you be a caregiver or whether you be a cancer survivor, I do encourage you to explore the options that are out there for you in the medium that you best like. For me, internet, not my cup of tea. I like the human, you know, touchy-feely thing. But there's just so much out there, and don't be afraid. Give it a shot. And that pretty much sums up what I'd like to say on that topic.
Great. So I will move on to introduce our next speaker, Laura Perkins. Laura has been a social worker for over 16 years, all of which have been in the healthcare arena. She spent the last 3 years at Texas Oncology South Austin. Her work at Texas Oncology has been focused on linking patients and family members to necessary resources. The majority of Laura's career is case management focused, but she also provides emotional support and patient advocacy. Her work encompasses everything from helping families find care for their loved one at home to resources for WIGs to linking families to resources for their children. Her passion is changing people's lives every day. Please help me in welcoming Laura Perkins.
It's an honor to be here, and I always tell patients every day, you have no idea the impact y'all make on my life, and they look at me kind of funny, and it truly, y'all change our lives, my staff's lives. It's really an honor, so thank you for letting me come share some stuff and some personal stories with you. Couple things I'm going to touch on, really the effects of treatment on the family and kind of the collaborative approach between patients, families, and the medical team, especially. I guess I can speak from a perspective of a cancer clinic where there's so many moving parts and so many people, and just the collaborative approach, because really from day of diagnosis it's life-changing. It affects everybody in the family, and everybody's family dynamics are different, everybody's reactions are different. It's lots of emotions. Some people tend to want to withdraw, some people are very vocal and they reach out for help. And some things that I share, from the clinic standpoint, is that I'm not here to tell you you have to go to a support group or that you have to reach out, but there is such an abundance of resources in the community, but everybody processes their feelings and just all the emotion around what is happening in their own unique way, and that's okay. There's really no right way or wrong way to process what you're learning, to process all the information that you're getting. I know sometimes it feels like it's overload, and how do I navigate the whole system, and I've got all these people at the clinic, and just understanding what everybody's role is. It can be overwhelming at times, and sometimes I see that there are patients where they have large extended families, which we know it's great to have a big, large extended family, lots of friends, people coming out of the woodwork. This is very, how can I help? How can I help? And it's exciting, but yet, and everybody likes to come together and come up with a plan, and I'll bring you dinner this night, and I'm going to pick you up tomorrow, is that okay? And sometimes the patient kind of can get lost sometimes in the midst of trying to, all the planning going on around them. It's like, wait, I'm here, I want to kind of set up my own plan, and I'll reach out for help when I want to, ask for help. I have a patient that has a tremendous circle of friends and support, and the patient said to me, Laura, I can tell you what I need, just you call my friends if I say it's okay, because she really felt like they're well-intentioned, but she wanted to be a part of that. And so it affected her friends profoundly. I've met a bunch of her friends, but ultimately she's alert, she's oriented. We need to remember that the patient is at the center, and because so much of what's happening is out of control. The date of diagnosis, it's like, what's my life going to look like? What's happening to me? How are things going to look? And anything I can do or that we can do as a team to help foster that sense of control in this whole sort of journey. That's what we try to do. It's really important. So many people, though, I mean, are well-intentioned. You know, everybody that's coming out, whether they're friends, it could be a church family, your neighbors, everybody has good intention. But sometimes you don't know what to tell people. It's like all these people are coming at you saying, what can I do? What can I do? Let me know. Do you need anything? Are you okay? Can I? And it's overwhelming. And it's okay for y'all to say, I don't know what I need right now. But when I do know, can I call you in a pinch? You know, that's, I think, the hardest thing, one of the biggest effects that cancer can have on folks is the loss of control. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, Laura, I'm type A and I'm in control and I'm this and I'm very orderly and I like to plan and I can't plan anything because I don't know what's happening to me. And that's very overwhelming, again, to people. And I think the biggest challenge is to learn how to ask for help. I know that's a hard one. I know if it was me, I'd be the one that's going to fight till the end. I'm not going to ask for help from anybody, but that's it's hard to jump that hurdle, but there are so many people that are there that are well-intentioned that can help. And again, I'd rather have people have resources and not need them than need them and not have them at their fingertips. You know, another situation that I see quite a bit, and I've actually been there myself personally, is the effects on the caregiver as well. You know, I know Penny touched a little bit on the caregiver scenario, and a lot of times there's a lot of emotion just around, let's say, a husband and wife, or, you know, it could be a brother or sister. I mean, there's so many relationships that we see, you know, in the course of our work. And something to watch out for, and I speak from personal experience on this one, is oftentimes as you're a caregiver, whether you're near or you're caregiving remotely, something called compassion fatigue. I don't know if folks have heard of that term before. My mother passed away recently. I was her caregiver sort of from afar, and I was so involved with her care and collaborating with hospitals and dealing with things from, she's in Chicago and I was here, so I was doing everything by phone and then going to Chicago and helping her out. And I came back to work and I was overwhelmed, I was exhausted, I just was feeling very on edge, and I didn't know what it was. I was so entrenched in all that emotion, I did not know what was going on. Here I am, a social worker working at a center, and I needed somebody to tell me, hey, compassion fatigue. It's something that is very prevalent, especially with caregivers, and it's not to say that we failed in any way. That's a big emotion. I know a lot of people feel like, am I doing the right thing? I don't want to fail my spouse. I want to be here. I want to be with them. But compassion fatigue is really something to be aware, just be mindful of some of the feelings that you might have and being able to recognize that. So having taken leave and being on the other side and being a caregiver, it's eye-opening, and now I can recognize, because I've been through it, I can recognize some of the emotions and thoughts that go with compassion fatigue. So I know guilt's a big one. I'm not going to talk too much on that, and you know, because it's caregivers want to do the right thing. They want to be there 24/7, but yet they have to work, and I don't want to leave because I feel guilty. We see that a lot, and how can we as social workers and other clinical folks help you all and your families establish healthy boundaries to where you feel like you can take care of yourself, but also not feel that guilt when you're needing to step aside or ask somebody for help. That tends to be a challenge, and one of the biggest rewards I had is a patient who was taking care of her mother, and she was just every day, every appointment, she just 24/7, I mean, did not take a break. And I finally had to say to her, we need to work together on a boundary that you're comfortable with, that you can sleep at night, that you can get home and be rested and still come back and take care of your mom. And she looked at me and she just did not like the idea. She was horrified at the idea of leaving her mother, of doing anything of the sort. Well, she finally came back and said, I've decided that Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I'm going to be at Mom's from this time to this time, and after that, I'm going to spend time on my own. And I said, well, good for you. And she was so proud that she set the boundary, and I could tell her affect, the ways that she just communicated. She was more self-assured, she was more rested. So finding a balance, I think, is a challenge as well, but something that we can easily help with. It's just normal. What I really want to say is it's normal to feel that way, for sure. Another thing I want to touch on is sort of the collaborative approach, especially working with the medical team and coming from a clinic standpoint. I know when patients come in, there are so many people that they meet. There's myself, there's financial counselors, there's the medical assistants, there's the desk nurse, there's the doctor. And it's enough to just come in and hear what the doctor's saying and leave. And it's nice to see that the team can work together and use the staff that's at the clinic. I mean, all of us have a certain expertise and a knowledge, and the amount of information that can be shared among the team is really, really helpful. And there's just so many resources between, let's say, financial counselors, social work, and nursing, and then us being able to reach out to community resources as well. The medical team is a powerful tool. The doctor, of course, is sort of at the helm of all of that, but there's so many other people in the office that are here for you. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable with your treatment plan, that you understand, that you're educated, and that you're supported. And of course, the doctor's focus, a lot of it, of course, is medical, and it should be, but then as social workers and clinical folks, we want to make sure that the mental health component of your treatment is managed and that you're feeling supported. It's so normal to feel like you're alone, and that's, you know, in your head you're not alone. There sometimes can be a disconnect between your head and your heart. I see that a lot, and I know I went through it with my own family. And what was interesting from a family caregiver perspective is that everybody, you know, as I said in the beginning, kind of reacts differently. Like my sister and myself, completely different reactions. My father said, Laura, you're the social worker, you handle your sister. I can't talk to her. You know, because he's like, you know how to talk the lingo, and I need your support here. And so not only was I there as a sibling, but I was sort of there as a social worker, but I was there as a sibling. And so it had a profound effect on our family. But, you know, it's interesting, people, through crisis sometimes, families can sometimes grow closer, and communication with people starts that may not have been before. And it's interesting to see. It's hard to see people in a vulnerable place. It can be rewarding at times. I know it was for me, for sure, to be able to be that social worker, but with my family be the sibling and support my dad and educate my dad and help in that scenario. It's a lot to handle, I know, but the biggest thing that we can do to help you is to let you know that you're not alone, and that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. I think that is the biggest challenge for people is, you know, I can handle it. You know, I feel like I'm a burden. I hear that a lot too, is people feel like they're a burden to their family and their friends. And, you know, it's hard to hear that, but I get that. I understand that that's a very normal and natural feeling. And there's a lot of people out there that care, and the resources locally, you know, here are tremendous. And feel free, as a social worker in a clinic, you know, use us. That's why we're here. It's wonderful, gratifying work. So I thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura. We're going to move on to our next presenter, which is Kim Fryer. Kim has 20 years of experience working with children and families impacted by illness. She's been with Wonders and Worries Incorporated since 2003 and currently serves as the program director, where she coordinates support for all new families coming to Wonders and Worries, and she oversees child life staff in all Wonders and Worries programs. She's also a child life specialist supporting children who have a parent with cancer and a facilitator for child-parent relationship training series offered quarterly. Prior to Wonders and Worries, Kim worked at the Children's Medical Center Dallas as a child life specialist supporting children with cancer and their families. Please help me in welcoming Kim Fryer.
Thank you, Abby. And just as Penny and Laura said, I'm very honored to be here and to be a part of this panel and to be able to see all of you here in Austin and all of you online at home. I am so glad that you're there. And I guess the first thing I want to say is the focus of my kind of time with you is on how cancer impacts the parent-child relationship. If you happen to be someone who doesn't have children in your home, please don't tune out. I would imagine that you have children somewhere in your life, whether you're a grandparent, a neighbor, you might work with children, you might volunteer with children, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about will apply to your relationships with the children in your life, whether they're in your home or not. I want to take a few minutes to talk about Wonders and Worries as a resource to all of you, certainly here in Austin, but also nationwide. Wonders and Worries is an organization that was founded in August of 2001 by Meredith Cooper and Melissa Hicks. There's some information that I think you can see on your computers. And Melissa and Meredith are child life specialists and licensed counselors who recognized that children needed support when their parent had an illness and that there was not support available, and they felt very strongly that that support should be free and should be professional support. And so they founded Wonders and Worries to provide support to children and help them cope when a parent has a serious or life-threatening illness. All of the services that we provide are free, and in Austin, where we're located, as well as Raleigh, North Carolina, and Ottawa, Canada, where we have 2 other sites, we're working to grow even more nationally and internationally. We can provide in-person support directly with children and with parents. But over the phone and via email and online, we can provide parenting support. So just know that we're here as a resource to support parents, and that is our goal, is to partner with parents in helping you support your children and to strengthen the parent-child relationship, because it is the relationship that children have with you, their parent, that will be the strongest predictor of their ability to cope with whatever comes with the cancer diagnosis and the treatment. We actually have a class that's called Child-Parent Relationship Training, and the focus of that class is to reconnect parents and children and to strengthen the relationships that suffer when cancer enters their life. The last thing I'll say about Wonders and Worries is we have 3 goals when we work with children, and those goals are to help them understand the illness on their developmental level, to help them have outlets for their feelings, and to help them build coping skills to cope positively. So now I want to shift to what happens when cancer enters the life of a family, and how does that cancer impact the parent-child relationship. That's okay, Lord. No worries. So as I was thinking about what is the impact that cancer has on the parent-child relationship, there's a few things that came to my mind. These certainly are not the only ways that cancer impacts the parent-child relationship. But the first thing that came to my mind is that instinct that we have to protect our children. And again, that's a parent's instinct, but it's also an instinct as any caring adult to protect the children in our lives. And that's a very normal, healthy instinct, but it can cause problems. It can hinder communication, because the initial desire is to maybe not say anything, or I don't want this child to be affected by this cancer. And so I'm going to talk a little more about communication later, but shifting that idea of protecting from, I'm going to protect them from the situation, which you really have no ability to do, to I'm going to protect our relationship. So that's one thing to just kind of keep in mind, and to know that that's normal to react that way and to be looking for it. And then the flip side is also true. Children want to protect their parents. So children will sometimes hold things to themselves because they're worried that their fear or their sadness will cause additional worry or sadness for their parent. So a parent may say, well, my child's doing really well, and what they see is overall really positive, but when the child does have an outlet outside of the family, maybe there are some things that they can share that they can't share directly with their mom or dad. Another way that cancer impacts the parent-child relationship is something that's very obvious to everyone involved. The fatigue, the treatment schedule, all the things that go along with cancer. From everything from being able to make the lunch every day that you used to make to just being present in the home. The person with cancer may be in the hospital, maybe at the treatment center, is separated physically oftentimes and then certainly separated emotionally. And caregivers just the same. The caregiving parent is preoccupied with all the tasks. And so that directly impacts that relationship that parents and children have together. And then this next thing around guilt, and Laura touched on guilt a little bit. But what's interesting about guilt and parent-child relationships is that guilt can change the way parents parent and can cause inconsistent parenting. So an example of this would be, a mom really wants to go to her son's soccer game, and she plans to go, and then the day of the soccer game she really can't go. Something's changed and she's exhausted, or maybe her white blood cell count is really low and she can't go, so she feels really guilty about that. She really wanted to be there and she feels guilty. So that next day or that next week when she's feeling better, maybe she buys him something extra, or maybe when he would normally need to be going to bed or wouldn't be allowed to have those extra snacks or whatever it might be, she might be like, oh, I'm going to let that slide because I want to compensate. I want to make up for the times when I can't be there. And there's lots of examples of that. This happens in everyday parenting. It doesn't just, exactly, it doesn't just happen with cancer, but with cancer there's this ongoing guilt that I want to be there and I can't, and so I'm going to compensate for it. And that can create this inconsistent parenting cycle that can really be detrimental to the parent-child relationship. So I'm going to touch on what do you do about that. And then the last thing that I want to focus on is how cancer can come into the life of the family and change the child. And certainly children react by acting out, by having increased anxiety. They may have mood swings. They may have poor performance in school. They may have physical complaints, tummy aches, headaches. And all of those things are going to shift the energy and the focus from this relationship to that problem, that acting out behavior, or oh my gosh, now we need to focus on school and try to figure out how to help you concentrate in school. So all of those things are just reactions that the child is having to the cancer, but they can also, impact that relationship between parent and child. So what do you do about it? What are some things that can make a difference? And when I was thinking about this, I was trying to think, what's the core here? What do we want as parents? What's most important to us when we think about our relationships with our children? And what came to my mind is that our children know that they're loved and that they're valued. So how do we help them continue to feel loved and valued in the midst of this unpredictable day-to-day life? So the first thing there is maintaining that trust through open, honest communication. And all the relationships that we think about and talk about today, trust is the foundation to a relationship, and that is absolutely true for the relationship between parent and child. So finding a way within that child's ability to understand and process, so within their developmental level, within their unique personalities and characteristics, finding a way to provide information and to be open and honest about what's happening day to day. This next one is a big one, and all of this applies to all parents everywhere. And that's actually one of the wonderful things that can come from cancer entering your world, is that you can gain this ability to focus on the relationship that you might not have gained otherwise and come out of the experience with a stronger bond with your child than you had before. But shifting the focus from my parenting goal is to make my child happy to my parenting goal is to help my child cope with the realm of human emotion. When we parent from that place of my goal is to make my child happy, it's a very different way of parenting. When my child's upset or frustrated or disappointed, I'm going to do what I can to fix that situation so that they'll be happy again. But the reality is we don't have control over our children's happiness. And even in the best of circumstances, children aren't always going to be happy. And as human beings, we're not always going to be happy. We're designed to have a realm of emotion. We're designed to have feelings of guilt and disappointment and anger and frustration and jealousy. So if we're parenting from a place of my goal is to help my child cope when they're feeling really frustrated or when they're feeling really sad, and I can understand that sadness and be there with them and support them through it, and then help them build the skills. Well, what can you do when you're feeling really sad that helps you feel better? That's a very different way of approaching parenting, and it automatically strengthens your bond with your child because your child feels understood and you better understand them, and you're a team together in this, whatever the situation might be. Then the next one is providing outlets for feelings and maintaining limits, and these things go hand in hand. So providing opportunities for children to express those difficult emotions, these really big feelings that they're having. They need outlets for that, but they also need limits around that, and they need to be able to do that in a way that doesn't harm themselves, harm you, or their environment, and that includes emotional harm, where if I allow my child to yell mean things at me and say horrible things, then, and I'm not setting limits around that, then they feel guilty and I feel angry, and that doesn't help our relationship overall. So maintaining limits and finding ways. It might not be okay for them to say those things to me, but it's okay to yell those things into their pillow or to go into the bathroom and scream them in the shower. So finding those outlets, and that's one of the ways that if you can't think of those ideas on your own, utilize the support and the resources that you have available to you, and certainly Wonders and Worries is there for that. And then another piece of that related to feelings is separating the feelings from the person and trying as much as you can to direct those feelings toward the cancer or the treatment or whatever it is that's really underlying that emotion. So when a 5-year-old little girl is really disappointed because her mom said she could have a sleepover, and then now she can't have a sleepover because her mom's gone to the hospital and she has to go to somebody else's house. So she's really disappointed and she's really angry with her mom, and she feels that anger. She doesn't know how to separate that out. The anger's just connected to my mom, but then she has a lot of guilt about being angry with her mom because she does have some understanding that my mom couldn't help that. So helping process that, you know what, you as her mom is also really disappointed and really angry, and really we're angry with the cancer, or maybe we're angry with the infusion schedule because it doesn't allow me to come have lunch with you at school anymore. So let's express our anger at that infusion schedule instead of having it be directed at mom, and it's a lot safer to do that, and then there's no guilt that goes along with that. And again, you're strengthening your relationship because you're doing that together and you're working together to say, yeah, we all have feelings around how this is impacting our life. Last two things, implementing routine, structure, and traditions. And for children of all ages, for all of us as adults, routine and structure is very helpful, comforting. It allows predictability, but for young children it is really, really imperative for them to cope positively. You can't control day to day. There are things that you don't know day to day. So maybe that structure is how each day you're going to share what the day will be like, or maybe it's around the calendar that you keep as a family. But having some routine and some structure, and then having a plan A, plan B. If I can't be the one to pick you up, Susie across the street will pick you up. And so that's a structure in and of itself. Traditions are really important, and they send the message that we're a family. We're a family regardless of this cancer. Our family unit hasn't changed, and we have family traditions that are important to us. Now maybe you can't maintain them in the same way. Maybe the week-long vacation that you usually take needs to be a weekend vacation. There's lots of ways that you can modify, and then you can start new traditions, but having some traditions. The tradition doesn't have to start at the birth of your child. It can start any time, any year. It can be a new tradition that you just create together. And then the last thing, in addition to that family unity, is one-on-one time. Parent-child relationships are strengthened through quality time together. But that time does not have to be 2 hours or 5 hours or a full day. It can be 15 minutes of time together, just you and your child cuddling on the couch. And maybe you couldn't go to the soccer game, but you have 15 minutes where you can hear all about the soccer game, and you can experience the soccer game and have that connection with your child in that way. I guess the last thing I want to say is that parent-child relationships are always fluctuating regardless of whether there's cancer in the family or not, because children are constantly evolving and developing, family schedules are constantly shifting and changing, so it's a normal ebb and flow, and it's very common for parents to realize, wow, I feel disconnected from my child. I feel like, I don't know what's happened, but I don't feel the closeness that I used to, and I want to get that back. At any point along the way, you can recognize that and you can get it back. There's never a time where you should say, well, we've lost it and we can never regain it. You absolutely can. And it doesn't take a lot to do that. So I just want to encourage all of you that you can always come back together and strengthen that connection and help your child know that they're loved and that they're valued in the midst of all of the ups and downs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. We're going to move on to our final panelist, Dale Milner. Dale is a licensed clinical social worker with over 30 years of experience offering psychotherapy to individuals, couples, gay and straight, and group therapy. She is a certified trained sex therapist and specializes in sexual dysfunction, intimacy, and couples issues. Dale also works with clients on a broad range of other problems. Early in her career, Dale worked in protective services, helping families where there was a physical and/or sexual abuse or neglect case. She then went on to become a psychiatric social worker in a medical facility where she worked with hospitalized psychiatric patients and their families, as well as with medical patients who had emotional problems related to their illnesses or home situations. In her 30 years of private practice, she has helped hundreds of clients resolve their problems and live happy, more productive lives. Please help me in welcoming Dale Milner.
Well, thank you for this third opportunity to come and talk with you all. LiveStrong has asked me to talk about partners or spouses. That's my focus this evening. If you all have had the opportunity to see the very first presentation I did for LiveStrong, I really go into a lot of detail about cancer and relationships and how it affects a couple, their intimacy, and all of the rest of it. So I don't really want to repeat all of that since that's available for all of you. I think you can access it on YouTube quite easily. The second talk was on emotions, so I don't want to rehash that. But in thinking about the issues that spouses and partners experience, I had a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago. She has gone through a double mastectomy, and this is her second bout with cancer, and we were talking about her relationship with her husband. And she was expressing some frustration with him and this, that, and the other thing. And it just came to me that her husband, and it obviously goes both ways, regardless of who is suffering from the cancer, that the partner is always in the waiting room. I think it's always in the waiting room, always a passenger. And what I meant by that is that so much of the focus during this cancer experience is on the patient. And yet the person that is living with the cancer patient is having all of the same kinds of feelings, is struggling with so many of the same issues, but they're always kind of waiting. They're always focused on, are you all right? What can I do for you? You know, they're out of control. That's what I meant by always a passenger. It reminded me actually of when I gave birth to my daughter 31 years ago. I was unfortunate enough to have 52 hours of labor. My doctor was quite embarrassed about that, and it ended up in a C-section. But anyway, 52 hours, my husband was on edge, tense. He was writing notebook after notebook of contractions, you know. We had pages and pages. Well, in between contractions, I could rest. I could even fall asleep. Not my husband. He was always on edge. He was always waiting. He was always tense and frantic that I would wake up and need something. He was always trying to anticipate. So once our daughter was born, you know, I kind of bounced back pretty quickly. But he was wiped out for another couple of weeks. That sustained tension Whereas if you're the cancer patient, you know, if you're feeling okay today, you feel okay. You know that because you know that from an internal place. The person who's with you, who loves you, who's there living with you, they don't know. So they're always a little tense. So that's what I meant. They're always in the waiting room. They're always kind of a little bit on edge. And then always a passenger. It's kind of like when you're driving in a car. You know, the person behind the wheel has control, and they can go really fast, and they can take the corners real, you know, sharply, and all of the rest of it. And you're the passenger, and you just have to. And in my case, I squeal, but you know, for those of you who are in that experience, you just have to try and deal with your own feelings and let the person who is experiencing the cancer have the control. And so, as I said before, and going last, they said some of the things that I was going to say about the different feelings that the partners, spouses experience are going to be similar to what the cancer patient is going through. So the sadness, the anger, the grief, the guilt, the loneliness, they're going to be present. And so everybody, I believe, mentioned guilt. You know, that is something that is just part of all of our lives on so many different levels. Coming here, I was late today, and somebody was sitting at a green light, kind of looking at the scenery, you know, and I'm late, and so he flipped me off, you know, and it's like, oh, I felt guilty about being impatient, but, you know, I wanted to get here. So I mean, I don't have to go through any of those emotions because you all understand them. But where sadness is concerned, I think the thing to keep in mind is that, of course, sadness is a normal emotion. But if it goes on for an extended period of time, if it's there and is prevalent for more than a couple of weeks, it really is worth your while talking to somebody about it. You know, depression is something that sneaks up on us. It's like age, you know. You don't notice from day to day, but lo and behold, you know, you look in the mirror and where did this gray hair come from? You know, that sort of thing. So try and pay attention. You know, your focus, of course, is on the cancer patient, but you really need to pay attention to yourself. You know, it's kind of like when you're on an airplane and they say if we lose cabin pressure and the little thing comes down, you know, put it on yourself first before you help someone else. So if you're a partner, you've got to really make sure you're taking care of yourself. You know, all of the obvious things, you know, try and get a good night's sleep, eat right, exercise, take some time off, the rest of that. And really, it's okay to have your feelings and to ask for help for you. So I've heard patients say they feel guilty because, you know, they're not sick, so why should they go and seek out help? But you're not going to be any good to your spouse or your partner if you're not in good shape. So, you know, that is your responsibility. And being able to have a wide support system, as you know, Penny and the other women were saying, is really important, because if all of the pressure is kind of on one caregiver, then that burnout factor is huge. So if you have a number of people, a number of resources, people not only that you can call up and say, hey, could you pick up some groceries, or, you know, do you mind doing this chore or that errand? But friends that you can really talk to. And, you know, with regard to guilt, so many people I've heard say, well, I feel guilty burdening my friends. They don't want to hear it anymore. But if you have a wider group of people to talk to, then it's not just one person you're unloading on. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I wrote down here, accept less than perfection and learn to let things go. You know, a lot of us are just clean freaks and, you know, gotta have everything in order and the rest of it. And having things neat and tidy gives us a sense of control, and that's great. But you can't do everything. You only get that same 24 hours that everybody else gets. And, you know, some dust bunnies or some, you know, papers in a pile or whatever it is, you know, let it go. It's just not so important. Reorganize your priorities. And I know, like I say, a lot of times that gives us a sense of control, but it's pseudo-control. The best control is internal control, not housekeeping control. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. And then to think about pacing your energy and your time so that, you know, there might be this, oh, my spouse needs something, and I have to jump up right now and go get it. But you may feel like you're about to fall over. So, you know, you can talk about that. Can it wait? Can I call a neighbor? Can, you know, you have options. So keep your mind open to other possibilities than you just, you know, jumping up and running out and taking care of things, because if you don't, you'll feel guilty. You know, so there's that other emotion coming into play. Now, I think it's on there. Is it on there? Anyway, balanced. I added that to the list of feelings. And, you know, sometimes you're going to feel okay. You know, I mean, we're always focused on the depression and the guilt and the loneliness and the sadness and all of the rest of it. But even through horrible times, you can have laughs. You can feel good. It's elusive. It's not necessarily going to be with you all the time. But it's okay. And when you do feel good, enjoy it to the fullest. And so I've heard people say, you know, oh, I felt so guilty because, you know, I just found whatever it is so hysterically funny. And laughter, as well as tears, is a wonderful outlet for emotion. It releases energy, and if any of you saw the second talk, Penny and I were on a panel about emotions, and I talk about releasing the energy that emotions produce in all of us. So that might be something you would possibly want to check out. Let's see if there's anything else. But again, those balanced emotions, like I said, I hope you feel a lot of those moments. But like all feelings, they're elusive. They come and they go. Let's see. Well, I think there were a few other things I was going to say, but I think these other ladies covered it quite well, and so there's no need to repeat. So I think from here we can open the floor and get questions.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. So if anybody here in the audience has a question, please, for our viewers online, if you could come up to the microphone and ask it to the panel, that would be wonderful. If anyone online has questions, feel free to enter that in the chat, and I would be happy to ask the panel for you. So we have any questions here?
Do people know that you won't be on camera? Because a lot of time, last time people were concerned that they didn't want to ask questions because they didn't want to be on camera. But so please feel free.
I have two questions, actually. I'll be very fast. One, as a cancer survivor myself and a professional actively involved in the cancer community, I have found the following situations. I have found situations where the partners have become, talking about spouses or fiancés, or they have become so much closer. Their relationship, the quality has improved dramatically. It's incredible. It's really great. But on the other hand, I have seen couples where the relationship has been negatively affected, and you found the spouse, the non-cancer patient, saying things such as, I can't handle it, etc. I know that compassion fatigue has to do with it, fear, etc., etc. So my question is, how often do you see either one where the relationship has been strengthened versus when it has become jeopardized, and what do you generally do to help the cancer survivor to deal with this issue? So that's question one. The other one is very general. Have you dealt with the issue of relationship with employers? Some employers have been very supportive, some have not, and I know some cancer survivor they have lost their jobs. So I was wondering, what do you do in these specific cases to help the cancer survivors? Okay, thank you.
Well, how about you all handle the job one, and I'll talk a little.
And we'll just repeat it for you guys since it was a little bit quiet. So she asked about percentage of relationships that improve and the percentage of relationships that kind of deteriorate as a result of cancer. And then she also asked about the relationship between cancer patients and their employers. So those were her two questions.
Well, I'll talk about the first question with regard to the relationship surviving or not after the cancer diagnosis has come about. You know, I really don't have any statistics, but what does come to mind is that the statistics for broken marriages apart from cancer is really very high. So much of it has to do with expectations of the relationship, communication, the ability to communicate prior to any diagnosis. And a relationship that is rocky or tentative is going to be the one that more than likely will implode. If you have a good connection and you have good ability to communicate with each other, there's going to be a much more likely outcome that you will be strengthened by this experience. So, you know, and it's not just strengthened, fall apart. It's everything in between. You know, it's not just kind of black or white, you know. But I encourage everybody to really take a long, hard look at your relationship apart from cancer and ask yourself, well, you know, do we have fun together? Do we communicate? What kinds of things can we do together? In the realm of the energy that the person has. You know, finding ways of being together that isn't just patient caretaker. But there's got to be some time and energy to foster the relationship and encourage the connection. So I guess, does that answer your question? You all want to talk about the employers? Okay.
As for work-related issues, I see a lot of patients and caregivers that are in the midst, they're working, and so many patients and families, especially patients, say, well, you know, I want to try to work, I don't want to turn my work over to other people, but yet I know I have to take care of myself, and so they talk it out. They sit in my office and they're kind of telling themselves, they know what they need to do, and that's of course to take care of themselves, but there's a fear of losing their job, and can I only work part-time? And so I always encourage patients to, you know, of course, speak to their HR and just let them know and say, you know, I want to keep working, or if I can't work in my full capacity, is there something that could accommodate? It is reasonable and appropriate to ask for an accommodation. And a lot of folks, I don't think, can ask for that. And so a lot of my patients will do intermittently because they like to work. It is a nice distraction. A lot of my folks, they love what they do and don't want to give up their work, but they have to balance the self-care, so they work they take intermittent leave for appointments. Other folks need to take a consolidated sort of chunk of time, and that's okay. But again, there's always that guilt thing that comes up, and you know, what, I hate to leave work, and what if my job isn't there when I get back? I mean, we hear a lot of that, and it's a balance.
What your rights are too regarding things
Yeah.
such as FMLA, and something tells
Exactly.
me LiveStrong probably
Yes.
would be a good resource for
Yes,
something like that.
Lots of support.
Yeah,
there.
I just wanted to let you know
Yeah.
that we actually do, through a partnership with Patient Advocate Foundation, we can get individuals connected to a case manager that can discuss what they need, disclosure rights, and also FMLA and other employment rights and benefits. So feel free to call us. We're happy to get them connected to a case
It's
manager.
true. A lot of people don't realize that there are options, and they can have both. But most importantly, of course, is self-care, of course. But we understand that, you know, it's like, but I work and I'm the sole care provider and I need the money to come in, and how do I deal with the emotions around having to take leave, and well, then I can't get my family what they need. I mean, it can be layers upon, you know, layers of issues, but yes, it's so important to know that there are options and that you can work and have time as well. Yeah.
And in fact, what came to mind for me is how changes in your work life, and who, if you were the primary caregiver and one person took care of the role reversals and changes that can happen, how disruptive that can be in families, and how financial stresses related to cancer, given that financial stress, according to something on Yahoo yesterday, apparently that's the #1 topic for all couples who are facing a lot of challenges. Boy, throw some cancer costs in there and see what happens if you're on a rocky road. So.
Thank you. So we actually have a question submitted online. The question is, my husband's family never talks about his condition. It's like he doesn't have it. Then I'll get cornered and asked, why don't I give him green tea? It can cure cancer. How would the caller, or how would the online individual maybe handle a situation like this?
Because I'm very, very evil, and I don't want him to be well at all. I mean, who wants to answer that one?
I don't want to do all the talking. The question, honestly, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it completely, but it was the family doesn't want to talk about the husband's cancer, but then what was the last part?
So it sounds like there's a conflict. So the husband's family never talks about his condition at all. It's like he doesn't even have it. But then this individual is cornered by the family later and asked, why don't I give him green tea? It can cure cancer. So how do you manage that relationship of no one talks about it, and then all of a sudden this individual is to blame?
Well, it's a challenge, because if these are your in-laws, a lot of us tiptoe around our in-laws, and we don't want to make waves, and you know, we want everybody to get along, and we want them to like us. But I think it's really important when, and I'm going to say a couple is going through the cancer experience, that we don't let our families get away with stuff like that. You know, that talk amongst the two of you about the family dynamic and decide together how to handle this.
United front.
A united front. And it might be the kind of thing where if they come over to visit, the patient or the spouse might say, oh, you know, we were at chemo the other day, and, you know, this is what happened, and bring it up. And they're going to squirm, but they'll get used to it. And so you're going to be the leader. You're going to be the one that sets the tone in the family, instead of, you know, these whispered conversations off in the kitchen. You don't have to participate in that. And frankly, I would just not go along with it. And like I say, you have to get over some of that in-law walking on eggshell kind of thing. But this is too important an experience to, let that family dynamic dominate.
All right, so this is another family question. So the family is always asking questions about cancer topics in the headlines. How do I respond to these questions?
Oh, could you repeat the question?
Sure.
They're having a hard time hearing.
So, great. So the family is always asking questions about cancer topics in the headlines, and the individual that submitted the question doesn't know how to respond to these questions that his or her family is asking them.
So it sounds like this person is saying they may read some latest research thing or some thing about green tea or whatever the case may be, and asking her about it, or feeling that there should be some kind of response from. Is this a caregiver who's writing it? Doesn't say. That's an interesting. It sort of sounds like the other question, really.
It's similar to the other question. You read something, and I would discuss it. If I have some thoughts about it, I would share my thoughts. But the other thing that I would do would be to ask them, what are you thinking about this? What does this mean to you? What kinds of things come up in your mind about this? Are you kind of trying to suggest something, that we are doing something wrong, or that we should be doing something differently? But you're having a dialogue. So, we were talking, or your question earlier was about couples getting stronger. Well, families can get stronger too. And you can break down some of the communication barriers that may have existed in families for a long time. Here's your golden opportunity to hit the reset button and not to be whispering off on the side, or not communicating, or not sharing your real feelings with your family members. Everybody loves each other, and you're going to be knowing each other for as long as you're on this earth. Why not take the time and put forth the effort to try and improve your relationships by being more open and honest with each other?
Not everyone knows how to talk about cancer, and not everyone knows where to get information. And perhaps these folks are looking in the paper, and because they want to be involved, they want to help. So a little education for those folks as well, and encouragement.
Actually, there was one point that I was going to make, my little opening statement, that I missed, and that is for families and for partners and spouses to feel free to ask questions of the medical team as well. Yeah. A lot of times it's kind of like, well, just the patient gets to ask their questions. And then it's, well, I don't want to take your time or whatever. But, if sometimes you have to set up a meeting with the doctor and with the family. If that's what it takes, that's what needs to be done. And, just having family members call the spouse. And so that not only are they trying to be, a caregiver, but then they're also trying to manage family dynamics. That's can be a huge burden. So, if it's something that becomes overwhelming, set up that meeting, invite them to come along, and then they can ask their questions.
And there's also some really good tools on the internet. What is it? Caring Bridges. There's some really great internet tools. Caring Bridges was one of them, where you can kind of basically, if people want to get updates and learn things, you can kind of post it in one spot, and people can check in that way rather than having to relate the same information to, and that can be written by the caregiver, by the person with the diagnosis, however you want to do it.
Yeah, it's a really good site.
I was having one of those conversations with the Cancer Click the other day, and a woman who's part of a professional couple, and in the medical field, her husband is ill with a very powerful cancer, and she looked at me and she said, so many of our friends have left us, and And she says, I don't really understand it, because she says, I think we're better now. You know, even though we're going through this, I think we're more interesting, I think we're more open, I think we're more wonderful human beings, and yet so many of these friends have left us. And I thought that it was a powerful comment, an interesting comment, and I wondered what kind of reaction you have about that.
I think that is a scenario that when I was talking a little bit about family, friends, some of the uncomfortable feelings that come up in family and friends, and a lot of the stigmas, just the uncomfortableness of not necessarily knowing how to talk about your cancer, and potentially emotional topics, that it can sometimes be easier to stay away. And then just maybe sort of, we like you, but from way over here, because maybe you're going to need more from me than I can feel ready to give to you, whether that be time or my emotions or both. What do you all have to say about that?
One of the things I do want to point out, I mean, I agree with what Penny says, but you know, the same kind of thing operates when couples get divorced. Yes. You know, that friends drop off the radar. And I think in some respects it's for the same reasons. And it's not always just in that, you know, you're going to ask something of me or what have you, but it's, we don't know what to say. We don't know how to handle it. And, you know, we're a type A society. I mean, we're rewarding the go-getters and when you're on top of your game and all the rest of it. So very little attention is paid oftentimes to, you know, the valleys. We're all about the peaks, but not about the valleys. And you all can educate yourself through this experience to not have that be your focus, that, you know, you can look at all aspects of life so that, okay, you're going through cancer or your spouse has gone through cancer, but you're going to be a better friend and you're going to know and understand what it's like. And so you're not going to bail when one of, you know, your friends comes to you and you find out that they're going through something similar. But like I said, you know, consider it a weeding out process. You know, you're really going to find out who your true friends are. And it's unfortunate and it's painful. But, and a lot of times it's not because they don't even care about you. It's just they don't know how to talk to you. They don't know what to say, and they're afraid of making things worse.
Well, and I was thinking about it in terms of development, just that as you go through a transformation, I mean, it's a transformative process that you go through when you face cancer. And you might be at a certain developmental kind of place with your peers, but you come out of that at a different place, and those friends haven't been on that same journey, and so they just can't relate to you in the same way, or you can't relate to them in the same way. I think about it with my work with teenagers, where I have teenagers that say, I just can't relate to kids my own age because I'm worried about curing cancer or the environment, and they're worried about what color purse they should put on, you know, wear with these pumps. It's like they're at a different kind of level, and it's not a fault of theirs, it's just developmentally they're at a different place.
And you know, everybody, like they've all said, everybody reacts differently in a time of, if their friend is going through a crisis, a change, a challenge. It's so easy for us to think, well, it's us, or you know, maybe they're ashamed of me. You know, it adds to that insecurity already, that vulnerability. And I guess getting to a point where you recognize that everybody processes and deals with a challenge or a crisis in such a unique way. Some people pull away because they're scared, they don't know. There could be fear. I mean, we've all seen just the whole array of reaction, and just trying to nurture the patient and family to say it's no fault of anybody's, it's just understand that everybody has their own reaction to a scenario like this, and it's not done with ill intent. A lot of it's fear driven, you know, so just not to take it's hard not to take that personally. But
it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is going to hurt, but
Yeah, of course.
you know, it's just one of those things. I mean, nobody wants to have cancer, but you have to deal with it. And it's the same thing with friends who can't seem to cope with you. You may lose very dear friends, but you may gain some really valuable new relationships. So, you know, to the extent that you can, keep yourself open and keep looking for the people who can relate to you. That's what I would think would be about the best advice I could give.
So we have another submission from online. This individual wrote, "What about the feelings of the patient and his or her guilty feeling about relying on the caregiver? What are some tools to ease that type of pressure?"
The other way around. We've talked a lot about the caregiver's guilt, but the guilt of the patient about needing folks. What did someone say a little bit earlier about a little less perfection, or
Yeah.
we want to do it all right?
Less control and less perfection. You know,
We all
I mean,
need
if we
each other.
think about guilt as a human emotion, I mean, first of all, it's a learned emotion. It doesn't come with the basic package. So shame and guilt are emotions that we do learn. And so because we learn it somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 years of age, sometimes we have been taught about guilt in a very heavy-handed way. And sometimes later in life, we can come to recognize through experiences like what y'all might be going through, that you have to stop and readjust your thinking. And sometimes people feel guilty about everything. I don't know if you've ever run into people who are constantly apologizing. They're apologizing for things that don't even involve them. But, you know, a lot of these individuals have been taught guilt in a very heavy-handed way. And so feeling guilty is something that enables us to be part of a society, to be social creatures, because we have to have some sense of right and wrong. But it's a piece of information. Just because you feel guilty does not mean that you have to, you know, feed that guilt or hang on to that guilt. So try and grab onto the thoughts that you're having around that guilt feeling. You know, what are you telling yourself? And then if you discover that what you're telling yourself doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, or maybe it does, talk to your partner about it. You know, acknowledge your guilt. I'm feeling guilty because I always have to ask you to do these things for me. Sometimes just that acknowledgement can do wonders, because the caregiver then feels appreciated, acknowledged, and you get a little bit of that burden released. So again, acknowledging it, bringing it up, working it through together can do a great deal to help with the guilt.
So actually, I would love to ask a question if I could. In talking with people, sometimes they've expressed, this is specifically a caregiver, they've expressed some discomfort in talking to the patient about how they're feeling during the process, because the patient actually seems to be handling it really well, and the caregiver is completely distraught, and their world has been torn apart by this diagnosis. So how would you tell caregivers out there who are struggling to cope, but also struggling to communicate that with their partner who is the patient?
Well, given the organization that I work with, I would definitely say reach out to some other caregivers, and you may find some confidence in your that will help normal. You know, we use that word a lot. Help. You're not rare. You're not alone. these feelings that you're having. It might give you that confidence then to speak to that person. And guess what? When you have that conversation, the world isn't going to end.
Well, and sometimes getting professional help or talking with somebody where you could role play, you know, and get some ideas of, it might have been the first talk I gave. Part of the handout had a whole bunch of conversation openers, you know, just ways of broaching certain subjects. And I think there are even more suggestions online. Ways of talking to your partner, ways of talking to your physician or health care team. Because a lot of times it is difficult. Once the conversation gets started, it usually flows from there. But it's all of the things that you tell yourself. Well, I shouldn't say this, and how do I say that, and what if this happens, or what, you know, and that is what kind of makes you freeze up.
And there's roles to fall into. You know, okay, my spouse has cancer, so now, you know, they're in that role. They're the sick person, and I'm the well person, so I'm the caregiver, and I'm like this, and this, and caregivers have these properties. And I think Dale's been talking a lot about stop looking outside for what all this should be, and really get more in tune with what you and your partner are really feeling, and communicate between the two of you. It's your business, it's your relationship, and it's basically your cancer journey.
Yeah, and thinking more in terms of it being a team effort, that you're a unit going through this. So if it's kind of like, well, the person with the cancer kind of, they're sort of here, and the spouse or the caregiver has less power, and their feelings are less important, and their issues don't count. Well, no. You know, it's like you're still a team, you're still a unit, you're still going through this experience together. You may come at it from slightly different vantage points, but you're going to have the same sadness, the same guilt, the same anger, stress, you know, all of the rest of it.
At different times.
Sometimes
perhaps.
at the same time, sometimes at different times. But if you are working together, if you are communicating, acknowledging your feelings, then you'll be able to work it through, and you will have a stronger, healthier relationship.
I was just going to say the question resonated with me because just yesterday a patient's wife was in the infusion room and was crying. She just broke down. So I escorted her into my office, and she just said, I'm so embarrassed, Laura. I'm so sorry I'm crying. I don't cry. I just don't do that. And it was powerful because she kept fighting it back because she just doesn't show that in front of her husband, and that's the strong face. She goes, well, I have to be strong for him. And I said, I understand. However, this is healthy. You can sit here and cry. She really struggled with just allowing herself to be vulnerable for that few minutes in my office, because how she presented to me, I know, was very different than how she was with her husband. I've seen the two of them interact. And so subsequently I saw her today, and she said, I can't thank you enough. I mean, her whole demeanor changed. It's like, I think she finally realized it's okay to feel that and express it in that way. And I'm confident that now I think she feels like she can be a little more vulnerable, you know, in front of her husband. And, you know, and I see that reverse too. I mean, I have patients that will come in and same thing happens. There's such a strong face, and there's so much, well, if I'm weak, then, you know, then my loved one's going to feel that, and then, you know, they already have enough on their plate, and there's this whole circle that happens, and it's just powerful that happened. Yeah.
Well, I think that is all that we have time for today, so I would encourage our online audience to feel free to call us, or anyone here. If you have additional questions, feel free to go online. You can call us on the toll-free number. I'm happy to get people connected to our emotional support team as well as to the panelists today. So we want to thank them for coming in and giving us their time, and thank you for all of those who tuned in online. But we are here and we are ready to help, so please take advantage of all of these resources.